Ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol observed, I would like to welcome you to the 7th Biennial CSIR Conference under the theme, Touching Lives Through Innovation, and more specifically to this live webinar, where we shall be unpacking the relevance of 4IR technologies in the agri sector. I'm Professor Moses Cho. I'm heading the Precision Agriculture Research Group at the CSIR. I shall be moderating the discussion. Our topic of the day is smart agriculture for improved productivity and profitability. Attaining sustainable development goal number 2 on our continent, that is ending hunger by 2030, is increasingly challenged by the adverse effects of climate change on agriculture, emerging pests, plummeting youth involvement in agriculture, and the increasing cost of agricultural inputs. Can smart agriculture make a difference? How can we leverage the power of modern information and communication technologies and make a difference in the sector? These technology and data-driven approaches generally involve acquiring real-time information about climate and within field variabilities of soil and crop conditions to ensure early detection of crop stress and rapid response to safeguard productivity, profitability, and environmental protection. This is exactly what the Precision Agriculture Research Group at the CSIR is imagining, developing through localizing 4IR technologies and bringing the benefits to bear at all levels of the agricultural value chain. For example, weekly farm-scale information on soil and crop conditions can now be made available to farmers. Such information is helping our farmers shape their decision-making processes. We will advance the cause of 4IR farming if we sharpen our capabilities in big detection and analytics, automated systems, and digital connectivity or Internet of Things. We have a distinguished panel here today to help us unpack the topic of the day. We would like to welcome Mrs. Tumisang Modiole, Deputy Director, Earth Observation, Department of Science and Technology, that is DSI, in South Africa. Mr. Zanu Mataruka, Senior Investment Officer at International Finance Corporation, IFC. Mr. Aaron Cole, Managing Director of FarmSol, South African Breweries Thrive Fund. And Dr. Abdurazak Ibrahim, Capacity Development Officer, the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, FARA, based in Accra, Ghana. Our panel will compare notes on the threats of climate change and emerging pests and diseases to agriculture on the continent and the opportunities presented by smart agriculture. The panel will also explore the ways and means by which small and emerging farmers can leverage the power of this digital revolution to optimize food production and the opportunities 4IR farming presents in the implementation of government's policy on agricultural, rural development, and indeed the food industrial revolution. Now let's turn to our panelists. Maybe first to find out the views and involvement of the department or organization which you represent on smart agriculture and 4IR technology. Maybe we start with Mrs. Tumisang Modiole, Deputy Director, Earth Observation, Department of Science and Technology, DSI, South Africa.
Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, Prof. Cho. I think I must declare before I start that my connection this side is a bit bad, so I struggle to hear, but I will look at the notes. So I think first I must say that we know that the 4IR, it promises us an exponential drive in new cross-cutting technologies with abilities to transform agricultural systems and contributing to advanced manufacturing, inclusive growth and economic development, especially rural economic development. And from the government side, we are also aware that we've got a number of strategies and plans that are in place that seek to address most challenges that we're facing. We've got the National Development Plan, we've got economic recovery plans that we're now talking about, and they all speak about inclusivity, transformation, and partnerships, but more than anything, they seek to address also challenges such as the food security and poverty. And from the Department of Science and Innovation side, we've got the white paper on science, technology, and innovation that was approved last year, which also emphasizes the key areas that I've mentioned. And we have a focus also on socio-economic impact in innovations and technologies, which are also relevant in today's topic, targeting the marginalized people, partnerships, also being able to develop prototypes and products. We are also now in the getting into the topic in the process of drafting the decadal plan, which seeks to implement the white paper that I spoke about. And one of the areas that we will feature in the decadal plan, it's modernizing agriculture, which also we can also term in smart agriculture. We would also want to draft and finalize the research development innovation plan, which we intend to consult and work together with industry, Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, and all the concerned stakeholders. The key focus areas being able to identify opportunities, promote competitiveness of large-scale commercial farming, and developing technologies that are relevant to support small-scale farmers. Our role specifically is to support or create an enabling environment for researchers in the industry. We should also be able to support the development of the information management systems which are relevant to support smart agriculture, decision support systems or tools which will provide, assist in providing the evidence-based decision-making to address the challenges that we have. So as we might also know, without going too forward, of the space infrastructure hub that SANSA will implement, being able to set up the relevant infrastructure such as which will be able to process big data, the relevant storage systems that we need. So that's how we see our support in smart agriculture. Thank you. I will pause for now.
A good package there from the department. Can we move forward to Mr. Zanu Mataruka, Senior Investment Officer at the International Finance Corporation? What is your organization doing in this space to foster the goal to meet the Millennium Development Goal, that of ending hunger by 2030?
And I want to congratulate the department for organizing such a timely discussion on this matter. So just to put things into context, the World Bank, of which IFC is one of the World Bank units, we recently published a study which showed that climate change had the potential of pushing about 132 million people into extreme poverty. Think about that, 132 million people across the world. And in addition to that, we've also done a study which showed that COVID had the potential of pushing 150 million people into extreme poverty. So these two developments have make up for what is potential a perfect storm, which is likely to affect sub-Saharan Africa in a big way. When we looked at this, when we did this study on the impact of climate change on poverty, one of the things we looked at 5 channels through which this was going to be transmitted. The first one, we realized that climate change was going to impact productivity and prices, which would have serious consequences on agriculture incomes. We also realized that it was also going to impact food prices, right? And as we all know, the people on the lower ladder of incomes have a propensity of spending a lot of their income on food, so they are going to be more adversely affected. We also looked at how climate change was going to be channeled through exposures arising from natural disasters. You know, it's a common knowledge now. For example, some of you may know that in East Africa recently we had a huge locust outbreak, which basically decimated the crops there. And then the fourth and the fifth channels, which we also realized, was that it was even going to impact labor productivity. As we start experiencing a lot of these extreme climatic changes, it was also going to impact labor productivity. And the last one was obviously on health, you know, things like stunting, malaria, and diarrhea, and so on. And we expect to see more increased development in that space. Now, we think that this, if as the development community, if we systematically address some of the SDGs, as you've pointed out, Mr. Chairman, this has got potential of reducing that impact. So we have a unique opportunity to try and address these issues. Now, as IFC, we have made a commitment that 35% of our investments must be climate related. That's a commitment which we have made. Right now, we are at about 28%, but that's a commitment which we want to make by 2025. You may also know that IFC is by far the biggest development financial institution. Our mandate is to work with the private sector in member countries. So we provide funding to the private sector member countries such as South Africa for development and expansions. And it is on that funding that is where we are making commitment that 35% of that funding must be climate related. And as I've said earlier on, we're now at 28%. We also have a fully fledged climate business department. And I spent a year last year based in that department. In addition to my investment role, I'm also what we call the climate anchor for Sub-Saharan Africa. So part of my mandate at IFC is to promote climate business across Africa, across sectors. Now, more specifically in agribusiness or climate smart agri, where do we see the opportunities? We have a unique opportunity in Africa to leapfrog a lot of these things, given technological departments such as cell phone usage and so on. And we've seen a lot of African entrepreneurs being very innovative in this space. So, for example, some of you may have heard a company called Hello Tractor, where they're using cell phone technology to leverage mechanization. Some of you may know a company called Twiga in Kenya, which IFC we have also funded. Again, using technology to provide access to the agriculture value chain for smallholders. And consistent with what you said, Mr. Chairman, in your opening statements, using that same technology to disseminate information on weather and so on. So that technology is giving us a unique opportunity, to do that. Even financing, you know, we've seen this in other markets like Nigeria, where they're distributing inputs using cell phones. So we can leverage all that technology to mitigate against this impact of climate change. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll stop here again to emphasize that we have made a commitment as IFC that 35% of our investments must be climate related. And being by far the biggest development financial institution in the world, we think that we're leading by example. And we think that where we can leverage our position is not so much in the financing which we provide, but it's also in the mobilization, you know, in the mobilization which we do when we encourage other people to get into this space. So we intend to have a very huge impact on this issue, and we know that if as the development community, if we don't address this as a matter of urgency, it's going to really affect the agribusiness in particular. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mataruka. It's very insightful. I would say pivoting on climate change. It's a welcome development, and we hope our private sector will take advantage of the opportunities presented by IFC to invest in the sector, and as you did mention, to leapfrog a number of technologies so that we can take full advantage of the 4IR technologies. Let's move over to Mr. Aaron Kule. He's the managing director of FarmSol. FarmSol is a South African breweries fund that supports small and emerging farmers. Mr. Kule, can you come in at this stage? Let me first of all find out if Mr. Kule has joined us. Not yet. Then we will have to move to Dr. Abdurazak Ibrahim. He's the Capacity Development Officer for the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, FARA. He will be connecting or linking from Accra, Ghana. Mr. Abdurazak, what is FARA's contribution in the space?
Yes, thank you very much. Do you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. So I am very pleased to be on this panel. Like the presenter mentioned, I'm from the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa. FARA is the continental body responsible for coordinating agricultural research on the continent. We are the technical arm of the African Union on matters relating to agricultural science, innovation, and so on. Within FARA, I think our role mainly is around 4 key issues. The first is advocacy in terms of the different approaches and models and innovations, including the 4th Industrial Revolution that's currently ongoing. Then we also advance partnership. We facilitate partnership across different sectors, but especially sectors related to agriculture. But by far, our major role on the continent is in strengthening capacities, and not just individual capacities, but institutional capacities to be able to innovate, to be able to generate new research products that will have that will deliver impact. We also engage in knowledge management, knowledge husbandry, so putting together all the knowledge products generated across the various regions and disseminating them. And we do strengthen the coordination of interventions around agricultural research on the continent. Now, our current thrust in terms of the 4th Industrial Revolution focuses mainly around youth empowerment, because as we all know, youth represent the major population on the continent. There's a lot of crisis. There are lots of development issues around youth, and we particularly concentrate on that constituency when it comes to the 4th Industrial Revolution. And so the instrumentality with which we approach the 4th Industrial Revolution and all of these new emerging technologies, including biotechnology, is by leveraging on what we call creative disruption. We're advancing the concept of creative disruption using the innovation systems approach. And what is that? The innovation systems approach, which FARA really advocates for and advances and has been advancing over the past 10 years, is calling for a shift in mindset such that agricultural research stop being conducted in a linear manner, so that professors and researchers and scientists do not just sit in their labs and think of intervention areas or areas they want to conduct research, without engaging with the wider community. So we discourage the linear approach of doing research. We want to encourage a multi-stakeholder approach where everybody is on the table at the time of the conception of research agenda. So for example, because we're focusing on agriculture, you bring the farmer, you bring the marketer, you bring the banker, the policy analyst, policy makers, the scientist, everybody's on the table at the time you're identifying a research problem. So, and everyone is on that table with the understanding that I'm here to improve the livelihoods of the community, so that by the time the research project is generated, which in this case, for example, might be a product from the 4IR, Internet of Things, a CRISPR-Cas product, for example, everyone has a stake in it. Everyone contributes in developing, in formulating the research agenda, in offering solutions that will really benefit the entire community. And this is why FARA has been advancing the so-called, what we call the innovation platform. Currently, we have over 400 innovation platforms across Africa. And each of these innovation platforms, they bring together these different stakeholders that I mentioned around a specific problem. And that problem sometimes might be a commodity. So we have an innovation platform on fish in Nigeria, for example. We have an innovation platform on cassava, on plantain, on banana. So we can have an innovation platform around an agribiotech product that leverages on the fourth industrial revolution. And so in terms of specific activities that we do, and personally I coordinate some of those activities in FARA, we do a lot of capacity building, because we know that the biggest problem in Africa has always been capacity, and not just individual capacity, like I mentioned, but systemic capacity, institutional capacity, which is now, for example, which is why, for example, now we are advancing a program called Agricultural Research and Innovation Fellowship for Africa, which targets creating 5,000 PhDs from Africa in the next 10 years. Now 9 years, we're already into 1 year, we have started. So we're engaging with various institutions across the world and supporting African scientists, African agricultural research and development practitioners to strengthen their capacities to innovate, strengthen their capacities to leverage on emerging technologies like the fourth industrial revolution, to apply that knowledge locally in a given innovation platform that is supported by FARA and our wider partnership, to come up with a solution to a problem. We also do a lot of foresight. In fact, we host the Africa Foresight Academy, which mainly seeks to, for now, disseminate and strengthen Africa's capacity to conduct foresight, to conduct scenario mapping and analysis. And hopefully in the future, we see a lot of African institutions actually internalizing foresight curriculum in their teachings. So, and currently FARA, along with its wider partners, I don't know if you know, but FARA is at the African Union level. Now, in each of the sub-regions, there are sub-regional organizations. So in Southern Africa, we have the CADESA. In Eastern Africa, we have Azareka. In Northern Africa, we have NASRO. And in Western Africa, we have CORAF. These are our sub-regional organizations which reach out to national research centers like the CSIR, for example, in South Africa. And together, we actually carry out our function of, setting research agenda, advancing new technologies like the 4IR and so on. So right now, one of our biggest program is called the CADEP XP4. CAADP is from Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Plan. Right now, these institutions that I mentioned, the 4 institutions in the 4 sub-regions and FARA, used to be responsible for one of the pillars of CAADP. CAADP is Africa's Agricultural Development Plan, which targets to achieve, among other things, improved productivity, improved nutrition, food and nutrition security, and so on. And the focus of this partnership, this CAADP-XP partnership, is in climate change. Although we engage in all of these activities that I mentioned, capacity development, foresight, knowledge management, and so on, every activity has been consciously crafted and is being implemented with climate change in mind, with climate resilience, and also implementing different activities with this mindset of innovation to impact pathway. Because we see that other parts of the world, for example, they have solved their problems of food and nutrition security. But we are in an emergency situation where we really need to innovate and really advance and fast track these processes. And that is why technologies like the 4th Industrial Revolution, 4IR technologies, are really timely in our continent. And that is, in fact, why we adopt them very fast in many cases. The other speaker mentioned, Hello Tractor and many other interventions, that are ongoing in Africa that are clearly creating high impact in addressing food and nutrition security with climate change in mind. So I think I will stop here. I'm happy to come back with a few more points.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim. You've mentioned, quite a good number of, things that FARA it's driving on the continent. I like the issue of, the focus on capacity development. In fact, if Africa would have to leapfrog a number of technologies, then we need to really develop, the capacity in all kinds of disciplines. Now, let us come back to the issue of small and medium scale farmers. We know the vast majority of farmers on the continent are small and medium scale farmers. In South Africa, for example, only 5% of farmers are involved in large commercial sort of farming. Now, and at the same time, most of our, subsistence and small scale farmers don't have the necessary gadgets, I would say, 4IR gadgets. The question is, how do we bring 4IR technologies, the advantages that come along with new technologies to the reach of our small and medium scale farmers across the continent. Let's dive further into this particular point. I don't know who would like to start first to unpack how our small and medium scale farmers can really take advantage of these technologies. Yeah. Could yes,
Mr. Chairman, I could have
yes.
I could start on that, and my 2 colleagues, obviously, I'm sure they would have more to add. I think one of the things I hear your point, but I think one of the true realities is that the cell phone penetration across Africa is very high, relatively. But I think at the same time, the challenge which we have is what sort of devices do these smallholder farmers have, and that's often complicated by the fact that who is the smallholder farmer, or who is the farmer across Africa in general? What we find is that they're generally older people who, even I think if you give them the technology, they will have some challenges in terms of manipulating that technology. But we've also seen a lot of companies being very innovative, focusing on the youth and so on. So I think if you're trying to increase rural penetration, if you work both with the farmer as well as the children, you may find that it gives you an opportunity to leverage on that. I have a client in Zambia who realized that there was this problem, and they've introduced zero tillage and so on, trying to cut down or to reduce the cutting down of trees and so on among their cotton farmers. And what they actually decided to do was to introduce community radios. So as a base for disseminating information. And these radios are actually not, some of them are solar powered, some of them you wind them up, then you can play it. So the community sit around and they listen to these extension services. So they're still disseminating information which allows these farmers to take into account climate change related issues such as changing weather patterns and so on, but using that technology. So there is no straight answer. We have to, one, find a way of leveraging the youth, and two, also trying to use some of that old technology because it can still work. Thank you.
Any other opinion on this? This is quite yes, Mrs. Modiole.
Thank you. I agree with my fellow panelists that you find that the small farmers, they are mostly in our local and marginalized areas. And I think in South Africa, we're speaking more and more about, as the president has declared, the district development model. How do we then bring in the partnership that is mentioned in all the plans, and in my opening remarks, I did also speak to that. How do we then bring about the partnerships between the large-scale farmers, small-scale farmers, our local governments, our research councils? I think we need to move more towards these partnerships that we're speaking about. They may not have the technologies that we're speaking about, but almost everybody these days will have smartphones that with the decision support tools that we want to develop, we're able to reach the normally unreached people. But then I think we can then also bring in the youth into it, because if we're saying there are more than, most of the time it's old farmers, where do we bring in the youth in this? We have agricultural colleges which are full of youth. How do we then partner with these colleges to then go into these small local areas to work with these local small farmers to be able to reach, and for them to be able to have access to these new technologies as well? I think, for now, I will rest there.
You're on mute, Mr. Chairman. You're on mute, Mr. Chairman. You are still on mute, Chairman. We can't hear you.
Hello. Yeah, maybe if I may add, while maybe the chairman is still on mute, to my colleague. I'm sorry I'm late. I mean, I just jumped in a little bit late as well. Oh, okay.
Yes, we can.
Can I continue? Okay.
I'm back. I'm sorry about the interruption. I just wanted to find out if Mr. Aaron Kule, the director of, or managing director of FarmSol, has just joined us. Mr. Aaron, you're welcome. And we had done the initial round of introduction, and our various panelists had introduced the organization and what they're doing within the space of smart agriculture. Maybe we come to FarmSol. What is FarmSol all about, and what is FarmSol doing, achieving in the space of smart agriculture.
Thank you, Dr. Cho, and apologies for being late. I've been trying to. I guess is the challenges of technology that sometimes I think as we speak today, as much as we might be speaking about smallholder farmers, as we see how complicated is still, some of us are still finding it complicated, and now you wonder about a smallholder farmer. How do we then make this easily accessible, user-friendly, and practical? By the way of introduction, I'm not sure if my video is appearing on video. Okay, all right. Yes, I mean, just in terms of introduction, my name is Aaron Kole. I'm the managing director of a company called FarmSol. FarmSol is an agricultural development company. We support to date about 980 farmers, smallholder farmers across 8 provinces in South Africa. What we're really trying to do is to connect these smallholder farmers to markets, big multinational markets that in actual fact want to procure their raw materials from the smallholder farmers, but they struggle to do so. They struggle to do so mainly because, firstly, of the quality, and secondly, because of the consistency of supply, where a smallholder farmer will say, I can deliver 50 tons of maize or 50 tons of, some of our clients are in the brewing business, like AB InBev. Now, if you want to deliver 50 tons of barley, for example, that need to be consistent because you've promised to deliver that type of a tonnage. Now, at the same time, there's a whole lot of funding that is linked to this because, as you know, smaller farmers do not have, funding, and these big multinational companies will then be providing funding to allow these farmers to be able to produce. Now, as we sit today, that funding gets limited because of the risks that climate change, for example, bring about. You might have already touched on this, but I hear now you're talking about, some of the technologies that would ensure that decisions get made in time in the field. I mean, the farmers that we have in our scheme, we have about 163 female farmers who are female, but again, a very small percentage of our farmers are still I am female. So I agree, majority are still older farmers, but I think what is important, as much as yes, connectivity is extremely important, but what also becomes very important is whether the information that is shared with that particular farmer can be practically deployed and real decisions can be made based on the information that is collected. And whether again is affordable, because again we might talk about smartphones today and we might talk about this technology, but is this technology affordable to the farmer? Would the farmer really see value in it? Because when the farmer starts seeing value in it, then of course, even to acquire a smartphone, which costs about 20,000 rand today, which is not necessarily cheap, in South African context, then you need to start seeing value of that technology on your farm. So just as a bit of an introduction from my side, we work with companies, we have partners such as AB InBev, who assist these farmers with the markets and the funding. But yeah, I mean, Dr. Cho, I'm not sure how far were you with regards to, like I'm saying, I apologize, I'm really late. I might, go back to the issues that you've already discussed.
We're at the point of, exploring, the ways and means, that we can use to reach, the kind of farmers that you are really talking about. You are small and emerging farmers, given, the challenges that they have in terms of access to equipment, machinery, and even, gadgets, your smartphone, and so forth. And I understand your organization, makes use of, extension, workers. How extensive is that, and how does that, play an important role in getting information to farmers in helping them, shape, their decision-making processes?
I mean, look, of course, because we, if you advanced funding, and I guess sometimes we talk about access to funding as one of the challenges that emerging farmers will experience or smallholder farmers will experience. But the reality of that, there's no problem with funding. In actual fact, I think there's a lot of funding in South Africa. The banks do have money, financiers do have money. But I guess the challenge is the risk that comes with advancing those loans to farmers, especially when we know that climate change as we experience it, the risks of drought, the risk, there's high risks in terms of advancing those funds to farmers when again you don't have collateral or security. So really is about how do you ensure that there is some sort of service or some sort of risk mitigation that you bring about when then you start disbursing that funding. So with us, for example, hence our team, more of our team or majority of our team is agri-specialists who actually spend time in the field. However, some of the decisions or some of the information that you require really need to be timeous and need to be easily visual so that you can be able to really make a call and make a decision, whether you want to further extend, let's say, credit, or whether you need to be able to advance credit, further credit, because maybe there's a risk that is coming. Whether again you see areas where you have, let's say, there's an insect problem, or there's an issue with regard to irrigation that you can be able to communicate faster, then at least you can be able to kind of save that crop so that eventually the farmer can be able to repay the loan back, and then the following year that funds can be again advanced to that particular farmer so that they can continue. So those are some of the real challenges that we face.
Very much for the input. We've got 3 minutes to go. There are quite a number of things we would have touched on. For example, the land tenure systems across the continent. It's a challenge. There is still a conflict between your statutory land tenure systems and your customary land tenure system. Access and control to land is still a challenge across the continent. We would have loved to touch on how what sort of opinions we have on how agribusinesses can have access to land, how can they acquire land to grow and expand on their businesses. Maybe with 2 minutes to go, we could have one word from maybe I'll go to Mr. Zanu Mataruka on the issue of land tenure systems across the continent and how it's impacting on agribusiness development. Maybe you have some experience in this sector, how agribusiness is circumventing, the challenge of conflicting land tenure systems. Maybe 1 minute, 1 or 2 minutes on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I think the land tenure issue is not a small issue. It definitely affects the farmers, but in terms of bankability. But our strategy as an institution has been to work with what is there and see how we can make it workable. Because if we sit back and hope to have the most ideal land tenure system, we'll never do anything. So we, where there are leases, we work around the leases. Even where there is community-owned land, as long as there is some kind of security of tenure, we can work with that. So I think my suggestion, let's focus on what is possible, because the land tenure system is a long, protracted issue, which is difficult to resolve. Thank you.
Very much. Let's focus on what is possible, and there are still opportunities to advance agribusinesses across the continent. At this point, I would like to thank our panelists for your insight. You've unpacked the topic of the day. What your various institutions are doing to foster 4IR technologies to advance agriculture on the continent. We've looked at the opportunities for our small and emerging scale farmers. The various ways we can help them to leapfrog a number of rudimentary technologies and increase production and definitely their profit margins. I think one of the most important thing, it's cooperation, how, the various institutions, can talk to each other, understand what, we're all doing within the space and fill up the gaps so that come 2030, hopefully, we would have eradicated hunger on the continent. So with that, I also thank our listeners, those who followed up us on the Zoom, and it's the new era of COVID, virtual conferences, and we hope we did communicate what we intended for this particular session. So with that, goodbye to everyone, and thank you very much for joining the session.